This is part 6 of What the Camera Saw, and here we are going to focus on evidence of a mysterious arrival at about 1 a.m. So the third thing the camera picks up, having picked up a man walking on Gail's property and then a series of mysterious lights around 12:55 a.m., a third around 1 a.m., the camera picks up vehicle lights consistent with the second person being dropped off at Gail's home prior to the alleged abduction. The evidence strongly suggests that this second person arrives at Gail's house by car at 1:02 a.m., and yet that person never appears on camera. So why does it matter if a second person was present in the vicinity of Gail's home near the time that she says she was abducted? Because after the camera picks up a man seen walking on Gail's drive at 12:35 a.m., and then 20 minutes later picks up suspicious lights inside and outside of her home, suggesting he's still in the area, and then the second person arriving at 1:02 a.m., the next significant thing that happens, and that's at 1:38 a.m., is that the person gets in Gail's car and drives it out of camera range. So these suspicious activities are all leading up to the moment where Gail's car leaves the property. And so it matters because an unidentified person in the area could be the person ultimately driving the car at 1:38 a.m. So how do we know that a second person arrives if we never see them? Well, let's play the footage so that we know what's happening here. So here's the footage from 1:02 a.m. We can see from the pattern of lights caught on camera that a vehicle is moving and then it stops in front of Gail's home for 31 seconds, long enough to discharge a passenger. So we're just going to pause here as the camera picks up the car pausing in front of Gail's house for 31 seconds. And then as the car moves again, the scene goes black. Well, the vehicle drives the short distance to the end of the dead-end lane that Gail's lives on, and then it loops around and it passes Gail's house as it leaves. But this isn't just a car stopping in front of Gail's house. We know that the vehicle most likely discharged a passenger when we consider the video footage alongside a witness statement that police obtained from a neighbor of Gail's 2 doors down. And I'm going to call this neighbor John Doe to protect his privacy, but here's the first part of his statement. He says, "My name is John Doe, and I live at," he gives his address, "I live 2 doors away from Gail Sherwood and her daughters. On the evening of 31st of May, 2008, my wife and I were both at home. We rarely go to bed much before midnight. On this evening, my wife had gone up to bed, but I remained up watching television until after midnight." The next part of his statement. "Sometime between 12:30 and 1 a.m., I finished watching TV, checked all the house, and went upstairs to go to bed. As I was getting ready for bed, I heard a vehicle pull up outside and looked out the window and saw a vehicle pulled up at the bottom of Gail's driveway." The redacted portion is that he gives her address. "There were 2 people in the vehicle. I did not look that close. I assumed it was Haley, Gail Sherwood's daughter, being dropped off by someone. The driver then drove off. I could not clearly see what type of car it was." So John Doe's account corroborates what we see on the footage. Moving lights that are consistent with car headlights as a vehicle stops in front of Gail's house long enough to discharge a passenger. The camera never captures a second person, but their presence on the scene is a rational inference from the car stopping and the neighbor's witness statement. So we don't have just the car stopping, but we have a neighbor saying, "I saw someone get out of the car and walk up Gail's driveway." A further rational inference is that the person being dropped off probably appeared to be female, since the neighbor's quick glance led him to mistakenly conclude that the person was Haley, Gail's daughter. But the person was actually not Haley. And why is that? Well, because we know, and the police were in a position to know, that the camera recorded Haley entering the home for the night at about 10:19 p.m. I think 10:19 is about here on this video. And it also indicates that she never left again after that. So you can see Haley's arrival for the night here at 10:19 p.m. The timestamp you can see is 22:19, which is 10:19. And we're going to see her in a moment come walking up the driveway and enter the home for the night. There, the motion sensor has been triggered as she approaches. There's Haley approaching. This is Gail's eldest daughter. There she's walked across the patio, and now she's knocking and waiting for a few moments for somebody to let her in. She's still on the patio. Lights come on inside the house. Oh, Haley's home. They open the door, and there you see that Haley has entered the home for the night. And if you watch the video for the entire evening, you will see that Haley never leaves the property again that evening. So we can rule Haley out as the mystery person. Now, since the person was dropped off but never appeared on the hidden camera, you might also be wondering, was the person simply going to a different house? That would certainly explain why they never appear on a camera that covers only the top of Gail's very steep driveway. So let's address that question. We can see from this satellite photo of the area where Gail lives that Gail lives on a very short dead-end lane consisting of just 10 houses, all of which are duplexes or semi-detached homes. Gail's house is indicated by the red star on this photo. The homes that you see on the left-hand side of the lane have their entrances on the street below and to the left rather than on Gail's lane, so they don't really figure into what happens on her street. So Gail's lane comprises only the 5 buildings or 10 duplexes that you see on the right-hand side of the lane. And because the lane is short and is a dead end, there's very little pedestrian or vehicular traffic beyond the people who live there. Gail's home, as I mentioned, is indicated by the red star, and the entrance into the lane is at the very bottom of the photo. There's only one way in and out of this lane. The homes are spread out enough that a taxi cab can easily pull up directly to the address that they are going to. So the red arrow points to where the car stopped at 1:02 a.m., right at the bottom of Gail's long drive. And the police house-to-house inquiries form indicated that 2 of Gail's neighbors came home that night, the night of May 31st into June 1st. They came home between midnight and 1 a.m. So I will take a moment to explain why both of these people can be ruled out as the person being dropped off in front of Gail's house at 1:02 a.m. So first, the police house-to-house inquiries form notes that a neighbor residing at number 1 came home between midnight and 1 a.m. Number 1 is at the very end of the lane, and I've placed a green circle-type shape on the house itself. So a taxi would have continued to the end of the lane to drop off a passenger at number 1, and I've used a green arrow to mark the approximate end of number 1's drive. You can't really see the hilly nature of the area from the satellite photo, but all of these houses have steep driveways like Gail to get up to their front door. So there would have been no reason to drop a person at Gail's house if their final destination was number 1. Even more so because the camera also tells us that the car that stopped in front of Gail's home at 1:02 a.m. actually went all the way down to the end of the lane near where the green arrow is in order to turn around and exit. So it is highly improbable that the person exiting a car in front of Gail's home at 1:02 a.m. was actually walking to number 1. They would have just gotten out of the car where the green arrow is. The camera also, I'm not going to show you this, but you can see it if you watch the whole video. The camera also recorded lights from other vehicles that went down the lane without stopping at Gail's house. One of those cars went down the lane at 12:10 a.m. and the other one at 12:26 a.m. So the neighbor headed to number 1 likely was in one of those cars because they said they came home between midnight and 1 a.m. Both of those earlier vehicles are consistent with that neighbor's account. So that's neighbor who was going to number 1. No reason for them to have been dropped off in front of Gail's house. Now the second neighbor is one who resided at number 8 and told police that he came home around 1 a.m. On this slide, I have marked Gail's home again with a red star and the arrow pointing again where the car at 1:02 a.m. stopped in front of her house, and I've marked number 8 with a blue pentagon, and you can see that a car entering Gail's lane would reach number 8 before they would reach Gail's house. Now, this neighbor did not indicate whether he walked home, whether he drove himself, or whether he was dropped off, and police did not clarify this point with him. So let's just suppose he was dropped off. That car would reach number 8 before reaching Gail's house, and if it pulled into the driveway before reversing out, it would exit the lane without any lights ever appearing on the hidden camera at Gail's house. And the same thing would be true if the neighbor drove himself home. That's probably what happened in relation to this neighbor if he arrived by car, because additional vehicle lights are not captured on Gale's camera after the incident at 1:02 a.m. At any rate, the house-to-house inquiries form includes the name and contact information of both of these neighbors, so it would have been a simple exercise for the police to simply ask them if either one of them was dropped off in front of Gale's house instead of in front of their own homes. But there's no record of the police ever doing this and systematically ascertaining whether the car letting someone off in front of Gale's house had anything to do with these neighbors. But as I have explained here, they can most likely be excluded. It's just not rational that either one of them would have been dropped off in front of Gale's house. So we are left with the probability that a second person of interest was dropped off in front of Gale's house at 1:02 a.m. And police never determined who this person was. Now, Gale's neighbor, the one 2 doors down who witnessed the mystery arrival and who I've referred to as John Doe, he was actually very surprised that police never followed up with him to get a full statement about what he had seen. So here's the rest of his written statement. His third paragraph reads, I was visited at a later date by 2 police officers, I believe one male and one female, with clipboards and asked if we had seen anything after midnight on the 1st of June 2008. And I told them I had seen someone dropped off at, again, I've redacted Gale's address, in the middle of the night, and he crosses that out to write in 12:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. I told them I had not paid too much attention as it was a Saturday night, Sunday morning, and I assumed it was Gale's daughter. They took a few notes and left. A few days later, my wife visited Gale to see how she and the girls were and told her about what I had seen. She, Gale, said it could be very useful information to the police. My wife told Gale that I had already informed 2 officers with clipboards what I had seen, but fully expected them to return and take a full statement in the following days. We were all very surprised when this did not happen. This is indeed surprising. One would think that the police would be very interested in doing all they could to track anyone arriving at Gale's home close to the time that she said she was abducted. But they did not follow up with this neighbor. The police did not follow up about this incident. Now, they did indeed talk to this neighbor as part of the house-to-house inquiries process, and that's where he refers to the 2 officers with the clipboards. So what happened when that happened? Here's the house-to-house inquiry information. In the top form, they write that between 1:30 and 2 a.m., male and female went to Gale's address, arrived in car. Well, first of all, we know that the police officers writing this information down got the time wrong. The neighbor's statement puts the arrival at 12:30 to 1 a.m., not 1:30 to 2. And the footage itself tells us that no one arrived between 1:30 and 2 a.m. If you watch the footage from that period of time, you'll see the car leaving at 1:38 a.m., and you will see no arrivals. And you can see here that police again checked off boxes indicating that the neighbor did not provide a statement and that he shared no relevant information. They were wrong on both counts. The neighbor provided a statement, you've seen it, and his observations were very important. This is further evidence of a shoddy and incomplete investigation, with the officers not grasping the significance of the information that was being shared with them. So, where does this leave us? If this second person is associated with crimes against Gale, that leaves one major question, and that is, why does he or she never appear on the camera? And in particular, did this person know about the hidden camera and perhaps take measures to avoid it? We know that Gale was not aware of the hidden camera until after she was arrested. But in contrast to her lack of awareness, there was evidence that her stalker was a police insider who had knowledge of police activities, including the hidden camera, and who therefore may have taken measures to avoid being seen. Gale always maintained that she thought that her assailant was a police officer because she could hear a police radio in the background while she was being raped. In addition, after the April rape, the first one, police had seized a key to Gale's car, which then went missing from a secure police evidence room and therefore might have been in the possession of whoever abducted her on the night of June 1st. And of course, clearly, for that key to go missing, it would most likely have to be some sort of police insider who had access to that evidence. But an additional piece of evidence corroborating her stalker's knowledge of what the police were doing relative to investigating her claims was this card that she received in the mail and which contains the message, "You are on CCTV." This card was one of dozens that Gale received from her stalker. It arrived at her house at some point after the hidden camera had been installed, But Gail had no idea what the writer was referring to because she did not know about the camera. Those facts become important here because her assailant may have known about the camera and may have taken measures to avoid being seen on camera, such as by avoiding the use of Gail's front door, by getting an accomplice to drive the car out of camera range, and warning the accomplice to avoid being seen on camera when approaching the house. So what's our takeaway on the mystery person, the mystery arrival? Well, the evidence suggests that not just one, but two people were in the vicinity of Gail's home prior to the time that she was abducted on the night of June 1st. Police have never identified either of these people. There is no evidence in the documents that police shared with the defense team that they were even aware that a second person arrived at the property around 1 a.m. One of these people may have driven Gail's car out of camera range. In addition, lights both in and outside the home, as we have seen, corroborate Gail's account of a disturbance that night. And again, we have evidence that the police did not understand the significance of the evidence that they gathered, both from the camera and from their house-to-house inquiries. So we can conclude that the camera saw a lot of very interesting things. It saw a man walking on Gail's property shortly before she was abducted. It saw suspicious lights or lights inside and outside Gail's home that corroborated her report of a disturbance, and it showed a second person likely arriving at her house that night. All of this should cause us to revisit the driver footage, and we will do that in the next video.